have with us this afternoon a representative of the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses, Brother A.D. Schroeder. Brother Schroeder is a member of the Bethel family and the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses located in New York City. Brother Schroeder is going to speak to us this afternoon on the subject, Are You Progressing on Jehovah's Highway of Holiness? Please welcome Brother Schroeder as he speaks to us now on this subject. Brother Schroeder.
My wife and I are very happy to be back in Tucson. We were here for the convention last summer, one of the conventions, where we had a chance to see so many of you, and now, of course, here again. Why, we've again seen so many of you, our old friends, and others who have attended the Gilead School, the Kingdom Ministry School, and so on. So we're all glad and happy to still be active in Jehovah's wonderful work and associated with his grand organization. We're happy too that during this month of April and May, we have a special campaign with the True Peace and Security book. And we understand you're having the same experience as we are out east and in other parts of the country where the books are being placed very rapidly, and a large number of the congregations are totally out of stock of this new book. And so we are printing hundreds of thousands of more in Brooklyn to get these into your hands as soon as we can. We're glad to report also that in Europe, in Germany, the brothers there have run out also, and the branch there is busy now printing more so that the brothers in the field can be kept supplied. Yes, we are living in marvelous times. Just as our text this morning, we had a discussion or a study in our day's text of the faithful and discreet slave, Jehovah's anointed witnesses working together, a group of over 9,000. And we have about 50 of these at the Brooklyn Bethel, where we are able to guide and direct the development of the worldwide work. The work indeed is expanding in one country after another, and we're glad and happy to see Jehovah's blessing upon the work. Now this afternoon we wish to have sort of a Bible study, and maybe many of you have brought with you the large reference Bible that was released in 1984 on the 100th anniversary of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. And so this reference Bible is a marvelous instrument, as many of us already have come to know, to enable us to come to a much more accurate knowledge of God's wonderful purposes. And that this publication is equipped with 125,000 cross-references that are found in the center margin. And then we have over 11,400 footnotes that enable us to examine minutely what the Hebrew text says, what the Greek text says, the Latin, Syriac, Aramaic, and all this enables us to come to a very accurate, I should say, understanding of God's purposes. And then you're aware that at the end of the book, we have two indexes, one of Bible words and the other index, footnote words index, that gives us a special index as to the 11,000 footnotes. And then we have a series of appendix items that enable us to come to accurate background information concerning the Scriptures. So this afternoon we wish to refer to the reference Bible, but if you don't have a reference Bible, you have other printed editions. Certainly use those, and you'll be able to follow generally the presentation this afternoon. The subject of our study is asking the question, are you progressing on Jehovah's highway of holiness? Does Jehovah have a highway of holiness? When did it begin? How is it, does it involve a program of holiness? Yes, these are some of the questions that we expect to answer as we proceed. We know that Jesus said, seek first the kingdom. That's God's wonderful government that's going to bring peace to this earth. Seek first the kingdom, but notice he said, and his righteousness, and God's righteousness. And so the way of holiness involves God's righteousness, doing that which is in harmony with his will, doing that which is right. And as Isaiah says, 55:8 and 9, as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are Jehovah's ways higher than our ways, and his ways are right. And if we follow in those ways, we are in the way of righteousness. So then, we wish to examine the prophecies that involve this highway. And are we on this highway now? Are we making progress on this highway? The watchtower last December 1st was a milestone watchtower. Remember, it was the watchtower article on being declared righteous for life. Every once in a while we have a watchtower with its deep study of Bible prophecies that is unusually enlightening, and that was so in connection with that December 1st watchtower. You remember there, it showed us that, according to Paul in Romans, being declared righteous for life refers to those of the anointed, who are of the 144,000 and who have been called by Jehovah God, and in God's way of dealing with them, they have to be declared righteous, but declared righteous as human creatures. And this would enable them, as they meet God's approval and are declared righteous, that they can turn around and lay down their right to human life in order to follow Jesus Christ in the way of the kingdom. And that they, in this way, forfeit their desire, their right ever to live on this earth. And they have the unique privilege as a little flock to then become faithful to live and rule with Christ Jesus in the heavens. Well, now then, the question arose, what about the great crowd that are now coming along? Those with an earthly destiny, with an earthly hope. Is there no way in which they are declared righteous? Because other scriptures seem to indicate, like Revelation 7:14, that only those who have white robes will get through the great tribulation. And we know that great tribulation is just ahead of us. And so this would indicate that having white robes before Jehovah God would indicate some form of righteousness. Well, that watchtower beautifully showed that Abraham was declared righteous. But was he declared righteous as to human life? No. But he was declared righteous as what? As a friend of Jehovah. And so this watchtower opened up new avenues of understanding that in our day now, yes, the great crowd, as we shall see later, being put on this highway, must now come to a point of righteousness, meet a level of righteousness in God's sight, that Jehovah can legally declare them righteous as his friends, just like Jehovah God was his friend. And then this would enable Jehovah God then to consider them white or clean, sufficient to get through the great tribulation and on into the new order. But now does this mean that as soon as they get on alive into the new order that now they automatically have the gift of perfect human life? No, the Watchtower showed that how much longer are they going to have to work and serve to meet Jehovah's standard of righteousness for that marvelous gift? Anyone here in the front like to express themselves, sister? There's 1,000 years, yes. So it is true that there's a certain level of righteousness that must be met now by the earthly class in order to have the white robes to get through the great tribulation. But in order to get the marvelous gift of everlasting human life, they must go still way higher up to meet Jehovah's perfect standards, which would be equal to what Adam was before he rebelled and became a sinner. Well, so those are some of the fascinating things that we examined last December in that Watchtower magazine. And of course, we appreciate the marvelous spiritual feeding program that we're receiving through the Watchtower twice a month. And we appreciate this great feeding service through the Faithful and Discreet Slave. Well, now let's turn to the prophecy that we're primarily interested in this afternoon, and that is Isaiah 62:10. Now, this is a prophecy that you recall has been brought to our attention over the years. So then let's read Isaiah 62:10. Here Jehovah orders, pass out through the gates, you men. Well then, what is the setting here? Are these the gates of Jerusalem? No. These are the gates of Babylon. And as we know that for 70 years, the Jews were taken captive and were brought to Babylon, were they not? And so in the year 537 BCE, under Jehovah's great mighty hand, he had the gates opened in Babylon to enable the faithful Jews to begin their long 500-mile journey back to Jerusalem. So Jehovah's given the order now to the faithful remnant of the Jews that were in captivity in Babylon. Pass out through the gates, get out of Babylon. Clear the way of the people. So Jehovah is going to build a highway, a figurative highway that runs from Babylon all around up the Fertile Crescent down to Jerusalem. So he says, clear the way of the people. Bank up the highway. So they're not going to be deep valleys and high places, but generally a level way to enable the nearly 50,000 that made the first trip to have an easy highway back to Jerusalem. And then rid it of stones, get rid of all the obstacles along the way, and then raise up a signal. There's a goal ahead, and that signal was Jerusalem. Getting back to Jerusalem, the holy city, and share in its rebuilding and the rebuilding of its temple. Now, before we go into the details, let's take the parallel and prophecy of Isaiah 32, 8 to 10. And here, the prophet Isaiah gives us a more detailed, thrilling picture here. 35, 8 to 10. I might say that in the long trek of return from Babylon to Jerusalem, the first group of remnant, nearly 50,000, made the trip in the year 537 BCE. And then several years later, in the year 468, Ezra and others were a second group of exiles that returned. And then there was another group with Nehemiah that made the return over this highway back to Jerusalem. And it's interesting that not only were there faithful, loyal Jews, like in Ezra's time, there were 42,360 natural, cleansed, righteous Jews that returned from Babylon to Jerusalem. But in addition, there were 7,337 Nethinim, or those of the Gentiles who had become Jewish proselytes. So they were allowed to cross this very same highway and return to Jerusalem. Now this is very significant and of extreme interest to us. So there were three waves of returnees. The first wave under Zerubbabel, 737, next 468 by Ezra, then next by Nehemiah in his time. Well, now this is confirmed in Isaiah 65. Let's start with verse 8 to 10, where this is worked out in further details. And there will certainly come to be a highway. Now remember, Isaiah wrote this prophecy in the 8th century BCE, and it had its first fulfillment in the 537 or the 6th century. So this prophecy was written 200 years before the Jews returned from Babylon. And there will certainly come to be a highway there, even a way, and the way of holiness. So there we get the title of our talk this afternoon, the highway of holiness. It will be called. The unclean one will not pass over it. So those that were chosen to return had to be morally, religiously clean. Not anyone could make this trip. And it will be for the one walking on the way. And no foolish ones will wander about on it. No lion will prove to be there. So no wild beast would give them any difficulty along the way. And the rapacious sword of wild beasts will not come up on it. None will be found there. And the repurchased ones must walk there. So there again, they must be the redeemed ones, clean Israelites of clean hearts. And the very ones redeemed by Jehovah, those that were his friends, will return and certainly come to Zion. Zion's another name for Jerusalem. And they would return with a joyful cry, and rejoicing to time indefinite will be upon their head. To exaltation and rejoicing they will attain, and grief and sighing must flee away. So there's the beautiful picture of the first fulfillment of this additional prophecy. And this enabled a restarting of the land of Israel being re-inhabited by Jewish settlers. And so they were able to grow and expand, and that was the population to which Jesus came to in the first century. Well, now why is this of great interest to us today? Well, because the prophecies of Isaiah not only have one fulfillment, some prophecies of Isaiah had two fulfillments. Other prophecies like Isaiah 40 had three fulfillments. So here's a prophecy that we understand has another wonderful, greater fulfillment. And that fulfillment falls due in our time, or has started in our period of time. We have had this prophecy explained to us many years ago. Let's take a look at Revelation 18:4, a scripture that you're all familiar with, that in the last days, the book of Revelation deals with the fulfillment of things that take place after 1914. So, Revelation 18:4 talks about the coming destruction of Babylon the Great. So here's another Babylon that's involved in God's purpose and prophecy. But now notice, Revelation 18:4, and I heard another voice, this is now in our day, out of heaven, say, "Get out of her, my people, if you do not want to share with her in her sins, and if you do not want to receive part of her plagues." So here's a divine command that's gone into effect since 1919, nearly 70 years ago, to begin to go out of Babylon and travel this beautiful highway of holiness that will lead eventually to the complete paradise organization of Jehovah. Now, who were the first ones to travel over this highway? Well, in 1919, after the anointed ones had suffered great opposition and persecution due to World War I, and the governing body of the witnesses was put in prison. There were 8 of them that were confined in the Atlanta Penitentiary for 9 months. And then there were scores and scores of brothers that were in prison throughout the land here in Germany and Canada and Europe. So all this came to an end, and in 1919, Jehovah's Anointed Ones were set free from prison, restraint, and were able to come together at the Cedar Point Convention and to begin to make plans to open up again the worldwide witness work concerning God's kingdom. So then the first ones that went over this highway of holiness were those of spiritual Israel. And we know from other studies that the spiritual Israel numbers how many? Can anyone in the front indicate that? How many make up the great spiritual Israel? The sister here? Yes. The sister says 144,000. Yes. So that's the beautiful, perfect number that God had in mind, that were to become the ruling associates of Jesus Christ. So they make up the spiritual Israel. And so those are the anointed ones that were being dealt with around 1919. These are the ones that had to go over that highway first. But now, since the first fulfillment included many who were not Jews, not natural Jews, they also went over that highway. So now who would these picture? Brother there, the great crowd of other sheep who are not of spiritual Israel. So these must also go up over that highway. And from what time forward did they begin to follow the anointed ones who went first? And now they became a later group, Brother Palmer, from 1935 onward. And we're in that time yet. And there are more and more going over that highway. And more than 3 million already of these other sheep. Yes. So we're greatly interested in all this. So now let's see what the physical facts are. Let's now review Isaiah 35, 8 to 10 in our day. Now, there will certainly come to be a highway there, even a way. So there is a channel, an arrangement by which there's a flow of spiritual food that enable us to be guided and directed to leave Babylon the Great and to come to Jehovah's wonderful organization of peace. Now, has there been such a wonderful provision for us? Yes, indeed. And it's called the way of holiness, it will be called. It's the way in which to serve Jehovah God with cleanness of heart. So this involves physical, moral, spiritual cleanness. It will be called the way of holiness. The unclean one will not pass over it. So then all of us, after we become baptized in water and have come clean of our past, and notice we've got to come out of Babylon the Great, out of organized religion, the empire of organized religion with all their false teachings and doctrines. Those things must be left behind. We can't bring any of those things with us. We must come clean on this new way. and we must move forward. And it will be for the one walking on the way. So it's for those who really want to serve Jehovah God wholeheartedly. And no foolish ones will wander about it. So those who do not make any spiritual progress and still want to play around with the world and make a name for themselves, well, then they must go back. They cannot make progress on this highway. Now notice, no lion will prove to be there. Now in the first fulfillment, this referred to literal lions and wild beasts that could have interrupted in the physical return of the Jews. But now who would these spiritual lions and wild beasts be? Well, they would be those who have animalistic characteristics that Jude speaks about, and that have not changed over from the old personality to put on a new personality of meekness, humility, fruitage of the Spirit, self-control. So then, on this beautiful highway involving our many congregations, any who are of a lion, wild beast type, rapacious sort of wild beasts, will not come up on it. Because any who go back to such a form, they have to become disfellowshipped, do they not? They must be put out of the organization. They must be put off this highway. So indeed, the prophecy is correct. In our day, there are no wild beasts or lions, you might say, on the highway to tear up the faithful servants of God. So when we once get on this highway and walk along with our brothers with our congregations, we are following along in a way of peace. None will be found there. The repurchased ones must walk there. So all of us who are on that highway must be declared righteous. The anointed are declared righteous. Now the great crowd must be declared righteous as friends of God. They must put on, wash their robes, their identification in the blood of the Lamb. These are the ones of us that are walking together on that highway. And the very ones redeemed by Jehovah will return. They're going to be successful in going across that highway. And certainly will come to Zion, God's wonderful universal organization, which in turn involves a spiritual paradisaic position even now, with a joyful cry and rejoicing to time indefinite will be upon their head. To exaltation and rejoicing they will attain, and grief inside must flee away. So already in our day, we have this happy lot that finds us together as growing congregations in all parts of the earth who are happy, at peace with one another, and developing a further stand of righteousness before our God. Well, now notice that going back to Isaiah 62:10, Jehovah says to rid this way of stones of stumbling. It's rather interesting to note that in the 40 years before 1919, that would run from 1879, when the first Watchtower magazine was published, until 1919, in those 40 years, there were many basic false doctrines of Christendom that were put aside. And so the anointed before 1919 already had cleansed themselves of these wrong teachings. And so in that 40-year period, the early brothers already knew that there was no hellfire torment. They knew that hell is the grave. There is no Trinity. Jehovah is one God. Jesus Christ is his Son. Man is mortal. We do not have a separate soul. We are a living. And so these stones of stumbling, of wrong doctrines and teachings, were already cast away. So now from 1919 onward, as new ones of the anointed came on the highway, Do they already have to be clarified on these basic points? Absolutely. Now let's take a look at Acts 3:21. Acts 3:21. Now let's start with verse 19. Repent therefore, this is Peter, and turn around so as to get your sins blotted out. Now he's talking to the Jews back there in the first century, that seasons of refreshment may come from the person of Jehovah, that Jehovah's blessing might come upon him, and that he may send forth the Christ, Jesus Christ the Messiah, appointed for you, first for the Jews and then for the Gentiles. Jesus, whom heaven indeed must hold within itself until the times of restoration of all things, of which God spoke through the mouth of his holy prophets of old times. So since the first century, 1900 years ago, there had been times of restoration. And now in our day, there are further restorations that are being made. There were restorations of basic truths during these 40 years, as already mentioned. But now, since 1919, there are more restorations of spiritual understanding that come into play. Well, now let's see what were some of these. And this is part of the progressive traveling over the highway of holiness. And our problem is, are we keeping up? Are we adjusting our thinking with the new things that are coming? And incidentally, now, since this highway already has been operating for so many, many years, when new ones come to a knowledge of the truth and come on this highway, are they expected to update themselves? Yes. They must quickly update themselves. Come along. And they must accept all these basics that we've already mentioned here. They must leave those things behind. Use of the cross and Trinity and hellfire and ridiculous things of such sort. Well, now let's see some of the new things since 1919. The Society's publications have divided from 1919 to 1931. This is called a period of 12 action-packed years. And indeed, it's been so. And I had the privilege of coming to a knowledge of truth in this period of time, 1923. My grandmother had studies with me in the Harp of God, and I've been able to experience these things. So in 1919, brothers were released from prison. The organization began to move ahead. And in 1919, the Watchtower article, "Blessed are the fearless." So this roused the surviving anointed, which may have been more than 20,000 in 1919, were encouraged to become alive again spiritually and now move along on this highway of holiness. In 1921, we had the Harp of God, the Million Sound Living Will Never Die campaign. In 1922, we had another Cedar Point convention that encouraged all the anointed now to get active in the house-to-house field service. Preach the good news. Advertise, advertise, advertise the King and the Kingdom. Sunday field service began in 1922. 1923, for the first time, we had an understanding of the sheep and goats parable of that in the 25th chapter. Before 1923, we understood that that parable would be fulfilled after Armageddon. Now we see the sheep have got to do something now. And the goats that are being polarized to the left must be cast off. And that polarization is now going on since 1923 with greater force than ever before. And then also in the years 1922 to 1928, we had the outpouring of the 7 bowls of wrath of Jehovah God against various segments of Satan's world, the commercial segment, the political segment, the religious segment, the military segment. All these, from 1922 onward, have received exposés spiritual exposés from Jehovah God. And we're in that time of great problems and troubles to all these segments of Satan's world organization. I had the privilege of attending the convention in 1928 in Detroit, and I can still see Brother Rutherford there to the audience of 20,000 released a new book called Government. And that's the first time that we learned and understood as Jehovah's Witnesses that God's kingdom government is a theocratic government. And that book gave us a study of various types of governments, communist governments, democratic governments, kingdoms, and so on. But none of these fit God's pattern of government for the new order of things. That was to be a God-directed, theocratic government. In this period of time, we also understood that the article of the Watchtower called The Birth of the Nation. This was an understanding of Revelation, the 12th chapter. And there in that 12th chapter, it mentions about Satan and the demons being cast out of heaven to the earth. And woe to the inhabitants of the earth. Now today, we understand that very readily, easily, and it's accepted by new ones that came to a knowledge of the truth. But back there from 1925 onward, this is the first time we heard of anything like that. And the physical facts certainly have proved this to be true, that Satan now and the demons are here on this earth, in the vicinity of the earth, and they're the ones that are responsible for the growing terrorism, troubles, and violence in all parts of the earth. And this is ever on the increase, just as this prophecy foretold. Then, in this period, 1926, Brother Rutherford was the president of our society at that time, from 1917 onward. Brother Russell was the president before that. And incidentally, we all saw the slide showing that the circuit overseer showed a few months back. And that enabled us to get filled in with the historical background of Brother Russell's time that we've just been talking about and on into this time now. And as that slide program showed, there are going to be sequels. And these will be further interesting to enable us to get the background of all this period of time. Well, before 1925, the various congregations had elders. The elders were elected. The first Sunday in October was election day. And all our elders were elected democratically, because the congregations were operated democratically like a congregational church. And the deacons, or the ministerial servants, they were also elected every year. They had to be up for re-election. And the elders, when they gave talks before the congregation or held meetings of the congregation, they always had to dress in a black suit with the Prince Albert attire with long swallow-tailed coat tails and a black necktie. In other words, the elders of Jehovah's Witnesses for over 40 years were dressed like Protestant clergymen. And all our speakers at the conventions were the same. So in 1926, at a large convention in London, England, the seat of tradition, what did the president of the society do? First time, he came before this whole audience with an ordinary business suit, not black, and purposely he wore a red bow tie. And so from that time forward, all the elders got the signal that since we're leaving Babylon the Great, we also want to leave all these other evidences of Babylon the Great too. And so we're glad and happy that our elders are just normal men nowadays to help serve us and guide us and direct us. But what about you ladies? You look at the pictures that you saw in those slides recently, or other pictures before 1926. Do you see an audience like this with many sisters without hats? Oh no. All the sisters had hats. Big hats too. And in the congregations, no sister could answer a watchtower study unless she had her head covered. If she didn't have a hat, she had to put a handkerchief over her head to answer a question. So that was the rule of congregational activities before 1926. So these were clarifications that took place. Before 1928 29, Jehovah's Witnesses celebrated Christmas. They were great Christmas celebrators. You see pictures of Bethel back there in 1918, 1922, 23, lots of Christmas decorations and giving of presents on that day, so-called Christmas Day. But in 1928, the Awake magazine, then called the Golden Age, came out with a strong article showing that Christmas is pagan. Jesus Christ was not born on December 25th and all that. Well, that came as quite a shaking. But most of the brothers already had bought their Christmas presents and Christmas cards. And so in 1928, there wasn't much action taken as far as that Christmas was concerned. But the next Christmas, the 1929 Christmas, is the first Christmas Jehovah's Witnesses refused to celebrate. And so it's gone down in history ever since that. So that was cleared away. Birthday celebrations went along with it. Worldly holidays had no special significance for Jehovah's holy people walking on this highway of holiness. We have to come clean and stay clean of all these worldly things. Yes, then 1931 came to be an outstanding year. In 1931, at the Columbus Convention, we received one wonderful gift from God. Anyone remember? Like to? Someone in the front area here. A sister. The wonderful, beautiful, remarkable, unique name Jehovah's Witnesses. Before that time we were called Bible students, Rutherfordites, Russellites, Millennial Dawners, all these vague, unmeaningful, and unfitting names for Jehovah's Witnesses that were growing and traveling on this highway of holiness. So there, the prophecy of Isaiah 43, 10 to 12 was brought to our attention. And did the brothers rejoicingly accept that new name, Jehovah's Witnesses? Yes, indeed. And the clergy at that time said that name won't stick. But that name has stuck. Not only upon the small group of anointed ones, spiritual Israelites, but since 1935 upon all the great crowd. They have lived up to the name. They actually go from house to house and bear witness to the name of the great God Jehovah. Another thing happened in 1919. Part of this cleansing, getting rid of these Babylonish hindrances to true worship of God. One of those hindrances was the use of the cross. So, like Christendom, Jehovah's Witnesses used the cross ever since 1870. Every watchtower until the October 15th issue of 1931 had a cross on the front cover. You look at all the old watchtowers in our libraries, they all have crosses. But on October 15th, the watchtower showed that the use of the cross was pagan. It was not that instrument on which Jesus was impaled. And so, in those days, the brothers wore a cross and crown pin here. The sisters had a little cross and crown pin, those of the anointed. The Kingdom Halls, some of them had a cross chipped into the sidewalk as you approached into the Kingdom Hall. And, like some of the churches in Christendom that used the cross, that was accepted. But not after 1931. No witness of Jehovah is involved in the use of a cross. And isn't that one of the things that make us so different from every segment of Christendom? Absolutely. We want to keep it that way. So those 12 years indeed were action-packed. And it's just like when sisters peel onions in preparing the menu for the day. Peeling onions cause tears, do they not? And so in these 12 years and since then, there have been many tears shed as these new things were brought to the attention of the brothers and the sisters. It shook them for a little bit, but they had such spiritual courage and strength that after a few days they put these things away and have forgotten them. And so now what about all the new ones that are coming along since 1935? Do they have to forget all these things too? Absolutely. No witness today on this highway of holiness can come using a cross or celebrate Christmas or any of those things. So we are glad and happy then to be cleansed. Now we come to the period of time, 1932 to 1945, another period of fast moving ahead in cleanness. In 1932, we had the shaking revelation or study as far as the Bible is concerned, that Jehovah's organization is not a democracy. And so in 1932, the election of elective elders came to an end, and deacons. We have not had elections in our congregations since October 1932. So the office of elective elders, as they were called in those days, has terminated. And so all the servants that serve in congregations from 1938 onward, where there was a further study of the theocratic organization, all these are appointed, properly appointed, and then they serve for life pending behavior, not up for reappointment every year. Also in 1932, we received the clarification that all the restoration prophecies in the Bible, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, these restoration prophecies do not apply to natural Israel today. Why, in Brother Russell's time in 1910, he talked to 4,000 Jews in New York. Brother Rutherford in 1925 talked to Jews, and we had a special book called the Comfort for the Jews. It was thought that in this time now, after 1914, with the kingdom's establishment, that the first ones that to be brought in would be the Jews. They would be given the first opportunity. Then would come the Gentiles into Jehovah's organization. In those days, it was thought that there were two phases of the kingdom. The first phase was the heavenly phase, 144,000. But there was an earthly phase. First the Jews, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as princes, and then the Jews would come in for special favor, and then would come all the Gentiles after that down the line. But in 1932, in the Vindication Book number 2, it was presented for us for the first time, and very satisfyingly so, that all these prophecies do not refer to natural Israel of the 20th century. They refer to spiritual Israel that's been revived in this 20th century. And that has opened up vast new vistas of spiritual understanding to those of us on the highway of holiness. My, that came just in time. Zionism already were sending thousands of Jews back to Palestine. They were buying up property, and they were looking forward to the time when they would have a revolution in Palestine and establish a Jewish state. And so finally that did happen. And in 1949, due to the action of force, Jews took control of the so-called Promised Land, established the state of Israel that operates to this day. But it has to be maintained not by God's power, but by military force, does it not? And in the midst of great violence. And so, aren't we glad that we took the right stand before all this wresting of control took place in Israel? So no longer can they claim that we are pro-Jewish. See, before 1932, that was the problem. We were branded as worldwide organization that were Zionists, that were pro-Israel. And we were charged with that in all the Arab countries. We're banned in these Arab countries, Egypt and other places, because we were Zionists. In 1932, we took our stand against that. And so that was corrected. 1935, and the privilege of being in that convention too, where Brother Rutherford talked to about 20,000 in Washington. And there Brother Rutherford opened up the understanding of Revelation 7, 9 to 14, about the great crowd assembled before the throne of Jehovah here on the earth. Before 1935, our foggy understanding of the kingdom, we understood that there were three classes in God's purpose. There was the little flock, the 144,000 going to heaven with Christ, even as we correctly understand today. But we understood the great crowd of Revelation 7 to be a middle class. They too were going to go to heaven. And they were going to be companions, and there would be millions of them also in heaven. And so this was going along with Christendom and their idea that heaven would be filled with millions of people and so on. And then the third understanding, the third class, was the earthly class made up of those who are going to live on the earth forever. But as Brother Rutherford gave that talk, and as we listened to that talk, why that second class, the great crowd, descended out of heaven and came to be the same as the Jonadab class, the earthly class, that we understood correctly way back to Brother Russell's time, from 1870 to 79 forward. And this now corrected the Scriptures. The Scriptures always speak of a new heavens and a new earth. They never speak of a new heavens and a middle heavens and an earth. Just the two. And that's the way it beautifully has been developing ever since. In 1938, the theocratic organization went into effect. 1939, the issue of neutrality was clarified. World War II was just beginning. Jehovah's Witnesses were able to take the right stand. 1941 at St. Louis here, many of you were there. And we received the correct understanding that the issue today is universal domination. The control of the earth does not rest with the Gentile nation, the king of the north nor the king of the south. But Jesus Christ has that domination, and Jehovah God as the sovereign. So, 1943, there was the opening up of the Gilead School. 1942, Brother Rutherford died. Brother Noah became the president of the society. And in that year, we had a correct understanding further of Revelation. Let's take a look at Revelation 17:8. Now, today everybody accepts this as so natural, so clearly understood, but not so back there in 1942. And so at the Cleveland Convention, we had a remarkable understanding, updated, clarified until this day. Revelation 17:8. Now the wild beast that you saw was, but is not, and yet is about to ascend out of the abyss, and it is to go off into destruction. Now before 1942, we understood the beast that was the Hague Peace Conference, the Hague Peace arrangement of 1899. Where the European countries and the United States agreed to establish a world court at The Hague in the Netherlands. And so that came to be known as the World Court. And so that was the first effort being made to control the nations. And so it was thought, well, there's the evidence of the wild beast now that you saw was, but is not. It came to an end during World War I. Now this is the understanding up to 42. It yet is about to ascend. So in 1919, 1920, when the League of Nations arose, there it was understood, there's the new peace beast. But the brothers were shaken, were they not, when that peace beast came to an effective end during World War II. So in 1942, even before World War II came to an end, we received the correct understanding. All the prophecies of Revelation have to begin from what point of time on? Anyone remember? Yes, brother. And no, from 1914 on. From the time of the establishment of the kingdom, all the prophecies begin now to be put into correct order and shape. So this old understanding of the wild beast being the Hague International Court Conference arrangement was long before 1914, so that ruled that out. So now, the wild beast that was, this is the new understanding, the League of Nations. But is not, came to be out of commission during World War II, but is about to ascend out of the abyss. So in 1942, what did we understand this new peace beast to be? And what name was it given? Finally, in 1945, brother there, the United Nations. And just think, Jehovah gave us an understanding 3 years ahead of time. And there was a reason for that. And now, the United Nations, of course, is organized since 45 and is operated now for more than 40 years. So there was a clarification there. 1950, we had the marvelous Yankee Stadium conventions. See, we're progressing along this highway of holiness. 1953, we took a strong stand against tobacco. Now, we must admit that our brothers, from Brother Russell's time onward, took a stand against tobacco smoking. But they were not disfellowshipped, or strongly counseled first, then disfellowshipped to give up smoking. We know of an incident in my wife's father's time when he was a boy in Pittsburgh, going to the congregation there, that Brother Russell was coming to the meeting in the Kingdom Hall, or the Assembly Hall there in Pittsburgh, and he passed two of the little boys, and he smelled smoke on them. So Brother Russell said, "Do I smell tobacco smoke on you lads?" And the lads said no, but that they had come from a store where there was some heavy tobacco smoking going on. But that was just an incident way back there to show that the brothers were shunning tobacco, use of tobacco. Well, 1953, strong action against tobacco. 1954, strong action against gambling. See, this is all cleaning up the way. 1955, we understood that the other sheep, great crowd, now also could be called ministers. In 1956, we got the corrected information on marriage, divorce, weddings. In 1957, that ordination comes about by water baptism, and that's our official stand to this day. 1958, we had the largest international convention ever. 253,000 attended the Yankee Stadium convention. 7,136 were baptized. 1943, the Gilead School was organized. 1959, the Kingdom Ministry School for elders. And so we have these and many other evidences of things that happened. These are all points of history, physical facts that have taken place. Now from 1970s to 1986, there were vast leaps forward, further spiritually, but these are times of which you are mostly acquainted with, and our time has pretty well expired here for this. So then, are you convinced, brothers? Because in 1972, Vanda, the president, the persecution became even more violent than ever before. And now thousands of brothers forced out from every walk of life. And they went to Mozambique or the Atlantic. 20,000 were in the Atlantic. That was their peak after 1972. Now, the elders there are amazing. They followed the Bible order of camp organization. So when they left Malawi, the brothers don't go out as individuals. They go out as a whole congregation. So when the elders of the congregation in Malawi decide that it's so bad they can't stand it any longer, then the whole congregation moves out with their bicycles, carts, all the things, and they move at a certain rate day after day, and they finally make the 300 or 400 mile trip up to Melange. And when they get to Melange, the brothers who are operating the expanding camp, they assign that whole congregation to a camp section. And it's so organized that when a neighboring congregation goes out, they have to wait 3 days until the first congregation has gotten ahead on the highway sufficiently, and then the other group comes along. So they always operate in congregations of 100 to 150 in their exodus. Well, so the brothers have been there now for many years. And so I had a chance to meet some of the brothers, the elders, the camp leaders there, the brothers, over these many years. Fine men, businessmen, well-dressed just like the brothers here. And they explained more how they operated there. They have to be careful. Jehovah's blessing is upon them, but the life level of their camps cannot get to be too high from the Mozambique and other peoples round about. If it gets too high, this invites thievery coming in and raiding their camps. So they've got to keep it pretty level. So they're able to accumulate extra funds because of their superior way of operating. And they were showing me there that there's a river runs through this miles of camp that has been developed there, that before 1967 that river would dry up every year or two. But the brothers told me since 1967 that river has not dried up once. It's an evidence of Jehovah's blessing upon them. Every one of the thousands of brothers are there sure. It helps to keep the camp clean, supply water for irrigation, everything. So Jehovah has really provided them a stream of life, you might say, all these years. And then they showed me that every family is assigned where they can build a little house for the number of children. And then there's an outhouse. And then there's a little garden space around for vegetables. But then this family of this congregation is assigned another plot, which they call a maize allotment. Maize is corn. And so they're allowed to raise larger crops out of this other allotment. And so they have streets. I saw pictures of them. Excellent. And then every so many congregations has a circuit. They all have their kingdom halls and larger halls. And then I was amazed. Now they have 9 major camps. Each major camp maybe has a circuit or a half a circuit, but many congregations. Then they told me that camp number 10 is the disfellowship camp. So when anyone is disfellowshipped, they are literally cast out of the congregation, and the Mozambique government has recognized camp number 10 as a place where these other people had to. And in 1975, they sort of had a rebellion. Some of the ones thought that they were of the anointed. Now, since 1975 came and nothing happened, why, there was something wrong with the faithfully freed slave, and so a rebellion occurred. All those involved in that rebellion were sent up to camp. So camp number 10 is the quarantine place. But the health of the brothers is fine. That is in the 9 camps. And now another camp has had to be set up in Sinde Masale, which is the one that's of chief concern to the society at the moment. 800 brothers there. The United Nations is going to feed some of the brothers there. This camp has been just set up within the last 12 months in a special situation. And it's located in the country of Zambia. And our brothers are providing money. The society is endeavoring to get more money into their hands to assist the brothers. And the first thing the brothers did when they came to the Sinde Masale camp was to set up a large kingdom hall for their religious education. So this was a very interesting study. So since the government wouldn't allow me to visit the Sindh Masali camp, they had a special meeting in Lusaka, which is the capital of Zambia, and I gave a talk addressed to our brothers in Sindh Masali, Malawi, and Malanji camps. Tape recordings were made, and the tapes were sent to these brothers. So I gave a special talk in English, and it was translated into Chichewa, because Chichewa is the language of the brothers in Malawi and the Malanji camp. And incidentally, I forgot to mention that in the Malanji camps, Chichewa is the main language, but in the course of the years, 15,000 Mozambique people in that whole area become Jehovah's Witnesses. And so they now are associated with Jehovah's Witnesses too, showing that persecution has brought further results and expanded the witnessing power. Witnessing in all these countries, my wife and I do house-to-house witnessing there. But in Zambia, every house knows about Jehovah's Witnesses. They've had literature. One that I called on a young lady, her father and mother were pioneers, but she never took to the truth. She married someone out of the truth, but now having family problems, and we were trying to encourage her to get back. So Zambia, in this one capital city of Lusaka, there are 63 congregations. And the convention that they recently had, the one stadium wasn't large enough. They had 2 stadiums for their Integrity Keepers Convention. A total of 125,000 people in that one city came to the convention, where we have 63 congregations. So this all indicates Jehovah has many people, and the time is here. And as far as many of these brothers are concerned that we meet, they are so convinced about Jehovah's organization, and they are 100% supporters. And Jehovah has blessed them over all these many years. And the lifeline comes through. They get the Watchtower and the Wake magazines regularly, and are spiritually strong. Now, just think, 19 years, raising your family, no electricity, no TV, none of this wild music. What sort of effect does this have upon the young people? Well, my wife and I had an experience because one of the sisters now, a new sister in Kitwe, Bethel, that's the Bethel of Zambia, she was raised there for 19 years in this camp. And what sort of a sister is she? 23 years old. Well, a very fine sister. She's not nervous, jittery. She's calm, well-controlled, well-dressed, well-mannered, speaks perfect English, and is a very fine person. And her father, I met him at this conference in Lusaka. He's now one of the district overseers of the underground in Malawi. But a very wonderful man, about 50, professional man, before he had to flee. But these brothers, excellent. Some can't write, but they can memorize. When they sit on a judicial committee, they don't have to look up what 1 Timothy, the 3rd chapter, has to say on qualifications. They know those things by heart. So the brothers there are doing a tremendous job. So then, I've been very pleased to give you a report then of what is happening as far as Jehovah's Witnesses are concerned. So now, let's close with 2 Peter 2, verse 5 to 10. 2 Peter 2, 5. Here we are on this highway of holiness. All right, 2 Peter 2, 5. Now, what happened to the unrighteous ones in Noah's time? He, Jehovah, did not hold back from punishing an ancient world. He kept Noah, a preacher of righteousness, safe with 7 others when he brought a deluge upon a world of ungodly people. We're facing a similar showdown now in the immediate future. And since Jehovah saved righteous Noah, He's going to save all of us who are declared righteous for life or declared righteous as friends of God. Now then, it goes on to say, and by reducing the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes. He, Jehovah, condemned them, setting a pattern for ungodly persons of things to come. And he delivered righteous Lot, who was greatly distressed by the indulgence of the law-dividing people in loose conduct. We find ourselves in the very same situation, and the unrighteousness is growing worse day by day, is it not? That righteous man, by what he saw, we today, as lovers of righteousness, what we're seeing going on in the old order, and we never imagined that 10, 20 years ago, nor did the brothers and Brother Russell and Brother Rutherford's time. But we are living to see the degradation of the present generation, just like Lot saw in his day. For that righteous man, by what he saw and heard, while dwelling among them from day to day, was tormenting his righteous soul by reason of their lawless deeds. And we have that same reaction against this wickedness that's going on in the world. Jehovah knows how to deliver people of godly devotion out of trial. He knows how to guide and direct us here in the States and in Africa, all over the earth, how to get us through this great tribulation. But to reserve the unrighteous people for the day of judgment to be cut off. So the goats must be cut off, never to come be involved in the resurrection. This earth must be cleansed once and for all time. Especially, however, those who go on after flesh with the desire to defile it and who look down on lordship. So there Peter described a deteriorating, debasing situation just like we are seeing today. Now, how much farther this deterioration is to go, we have to wait and see. But in the meantime, let's keep busy and happy within our Christian congregation and keep going along on this highway of holiness. And so we're glad to see that so many of you have gone in the pioneer work, auxiliary pioneer work. And we're glad that so many of our young people, after they finish high school, are now going into the full-time work. This is something that didn't happen years ago, but now it's happening. It did happen, of course, many, many years ago, when many of us were younger that did that. But now's the time for our young folks to get busy and have the joy of Jehovah in preaching the good news. Those who are rather slow in doing something about it are injuring themselves. You're not getting on this highway where you receive the protection. So let's get into Jehovah's organization, get baptized, and become an active member in connection with Jehovah's work. So as we do this, we will be cooperating with the faithful and discreet slave. We'll continue to be receiving guidance and direction in our congregation meetings through the elders. And we want to thank the ministerial servants and the congregation elders for their work and guidance of the congregations. And it may be that we too will have similar experience like our brothers in Melange camps. They're way far ahead of us. And they take action. It's always, what does the congregation say? What do the congregation elders decide? And everyone happily goes along. So again, may Jehovah bless all of you as you move ahead with Jehovah and Christ Jesus our King along this highway of holiness leading to the vindication of Jehovah.